Good evening, everyone. Sergeant, good afternoon. Sergeant Will Walsh, assigned to District 4 day shift. Been on the job for 18 years, and of the 18 years I've been on the job, I've been at District 4 for the last 2.5 years, give or take. Prior to that, I was assigned to the Tactical Enforcement Unit for over 8 years, and that was a very interesting, very rewarding, very exciting period of my career. Not saying that being a District 4 is exciting, because it absolutely is, but that was unique work for me. Being an officer in the department and having to do some kind of specialized work. Prior to that, I also was at the Firearms Academy, and while at the Firearms Academy, I did it for about a year and a half, 2 years, and before I was assigned to street crimes. And before street crimes, I started at District 5 when I first came on the job. I'm going to talk today about group development and how groups develop, how they come together, how they transition from stage to stage, how we as leaders in groups can help maneuver, help socialize our new people as they enter the group, how we can establish those norms of them coming into the groups. Just a good sense of finding what a group is and how it develops, how it transitions from stage to stage. For example, when you talk about starting a group, the initial phase of a group, comparatively speaking, if you look at going into the military, you look at that initial boot camp phase. So, what are those norms and those occurrences that are happening there? So we're going to look at some we're going to try to gain an in-depth knowledge of small groups and how they develop. We're going to look at the transitional phases as we move from the beginning to maybe even to the end, when the group is no longer together and we're starting to disband. We're starting to come to the end of our group's goal if we're coming together as a small group. And so we're also going to identify strategies and styles that we can use as small group leaders or as leaders to help us maneuver those groups towards a successful goal. We're going to talk about some strategies. We're going to talk about some lesson objectives. We talk about identifying and classifying strategies. We're talking about identifying and classifying stages of a group develop and how they go about developing. What are those stages? What are those technical terms that we'll use to try to get a foundation towards understanding and actually naming the different various stages of group development? We're going to talk about explaining the impact. Hopefully we'll get a roadmap towards understanding and explaining the impact of tasks, what's interpersonal interaction, and structural dimensions for each stage. When we talk about the interpersonal interaction, that's how we converse, how we see each other, how we conversate, how we communicate with each other. It's that personal relationship building when you talk about being successful and going through those various classifications of group development. We're going to explain how and why groups relapse prior to entering those stages and the distinct phases that they go through. Why a group would relapse. Let's say that your group is starting off very well. You guys came together, you understood the mission, understood the plan. Everyone understands the plan. Everyone's moving towards the successful completion of those goals established and those tasks established within the plan. And something happens that you relapse back to, okay, I thought we were doing this. No, I thought we were doing that. What happened? What occurred? And how we can identify those distinct issues that might force or relapse us back to a starting point. As leaders, we want to understand that. We want to be capable of really understanding that. Then we'll talk about leadership responses for each stage of development, those tools in the toolbox that can help us as leaders, whether it be a style in which we implement basic goal settings, basic tasks, and how we go about explaining and accomplishing those things with our group, or various leadership strategies that will help us to maneuver and kind of manipulate the group to be more successful, because that's what we're talking about. When you talk about leading people, when you talk about establishing goals for groups, whose responsibility is that? And if it's the leader's responsibility for the success of that group, how do we accomplish it? How do we garner that esprit de corps that we can become kind of like a one unit, but having various characteristics, various backgrounds, various diversities of mindsets, of thinking to make that successful. So we're going to need strategies. Then we're going to talk about Seagull leadership. That is very interesting. Just to touch on it, I thought that's a very good way of describing certain leaders, whether they're successful or not successful. Then we'll look at the case study, we'll look at the student journal, and maybe we'll even do the survey at the end. So are there any questions? Cool. Let's talk about the best team ever. The best team ever that you were ever on. And we'll do a quick scenario. We'll do a quick exercise. So what I want you guys to do, I want you guys to take about 5 minutes, nothing real fancy, nothing, just to get us into the lesson, get us moving, and get us understanding that we're hopefully on the same page when we talk about those developing those groups. So it's beneficial that we're able to answer these questions. What was your level of motivation in this group, the best team ever, the best group you were ever in? What was your level of job satisfaction, the level of individual performances, and level of team performance, and level of supervision, you know, work satisfaction, cohesiveness, those type of things. So take 5 minutes. Each table, each come up with just one person, or one person that's willing to share the best team you're ever on and why that was the best team you're ever on. And we'll bring out those motivational factors, job satisfaction, and performance. So let's take 5 minutes to do that. Now we're going to talk about small groups, organizational development. Who can give me a definition of in your own way, in your own words, organizational development? What does it mean? What is it? What are we talking about when we talk about organizational development? Okay. Who wants to take a stab at small group development? If organizational development, and we can agree that it is this and thus, and I'm saying you're right or wrong, what's small group development? What is that about? And why does that differ from organizational group development? So, who can answer that? Who wants to take a stab? Cool, thank you. So, when you talk about organizational development, studies are the analysis of the organization, system-wide work products, but basically comes down to all the wheels within the wheels. It's that huge parental organization that we're all a part of when you talk about MPD, when you talk about huge organizations, when you talk about the military and those smaller units that comprise and those components that make up what the military structure actually is, those things within the thing that we call our military. Small groups development, looking at, is the study of predictable development of one organizational component, one small work group, one of the wheels. That's saying that we really want to understand the dynamics of the group we're working in. Yeah, we're part of the whole Milwaukee Police Department, and as part of the whole, we have responsibilities to achieving organizational goals that are set forth by the department. And we accomplish that by understanding our area of expertise, our area of control, our area of influence, I like to say. So if we concentrate on our specific will, our own area of influence and control, and we devote our energies and our time to that successful completion or accomplishment of certain tasks and goals, we can say we're successful as far as that small group development, as leaders of that small, because we really can't affect the organizational development. We really can't, the overall culture and structure. Yeah, we can affect it sometimes negative. We'll talk about those negative relapses too. But yeah, we can affect it in ways by making front page news, a Jude type thing or a Rampart type incident. Yeah, those things can affect it. But hopefully, as leaders, we won't impact it in a negative way. So we want to look at the positives of small group development and us as leaders being part of that system and understanding our role within that system. So I want to make sure we're clear when we talk about not so much the organizational development or structure, but the small group development and structure. Any questions? If you compare the two, the differences would be inherent in the levels of analysis result in far more distinction than similarities. How much time is actually put into your group? Let's talk about perspectives on groups. When we talk about forming, storming, norming, and performing and adjourning, what are we saying? What are these actual? What does this mean? Forming. When you talk about stages of group development, you're actually talking about where we are when we start, and we start moving through various phases towards whatever the task might be established, towards whatever the goal might be that we're trying to reach. So we want to put it in a format that we can start as leaders, and we always want to reflect as leaders in that group. So when you look at Tuckman, and we'll talk about Hershey, Blanchard, Ivanovich, and Tannenbaum here in a second, but let's just look at the far left part of the matrix that's established here. So when you look at forming from Tuckman, who came out with this in 1965 or 66, I believe. So this is old stuff. This is old tried and true stuff. When you look at forming and you look at the below sentence, what is what and who is who, we're starting to establish what's going on, who's who in it, what's my role in it, how am I going to contribute, what things do I bring to the table that will be of value to this organization, to this group that's starting to form. And when we talk about small group development, where do I fit in this group? How effective will I be as a member of this group? Talk about storming. Competition for status occurs here. This is a funny thing here because this is the fire that will either temper the group to meld it into something solid and successful, or it'll burn it away. It'll destroy it. It'll kind of burn it to ashes, so to speak. So in the storming phase, you're starting to establish dominancy. You're starting to establish leaderships. You're starting to establish the dominant, influential people. And hopefully they're influential people in a positive way and not a negative way. But in the storming phase, you're looking at competition for status. You're looking at who's who. And since I'm the leader, I'm part of this group, I can hopefully establish myself as a dominant force in the group. Norming. Group norms surface. That's when we're coming out of that storm, that fire, and hopefully we made it through, that we're able to move forward positively and not negatively. So we start norming. We start having establishing norms. We're starting to establish a cohesion. We're starting to understand the goals, establishing those tasks that we have to move forward. So in norming, we're starting to really streamline what our group's about and how we can move forward. Performing. When you look at performing, you're looking at genuine team, genuine teaming. What is that? What does that say? It says that we're beyond establishing and understanding. Now we're coalescing to this very successful body of individuals that are part of this group, part of this team, and we successful problem solving. We're not afraid to share our thoughts, our feelings, our concerns, and that we know there'll be value. So in the norming phase or the performing phase, we're really out there. We're really smoking hot. This wheel is really moving and turning. And to talk about adjoining here, adjoining isn't actually a phase. It's actually the completion. It's the task is accomplished. The goals have been successfully reached. So what do we do with the group now? Do we disband? Do we continue to move on? Do we keep the group going or not? You know. So when you look at Tuckman, forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjoining, you're looking at those various phases of a group's development. So we'll call those the actual phases of a group. The starting, those things that will temper the group or make the group successful or not successful, those norms that will be established, and those the performance of the group, the cohesion of the group, the success of the group, those successful problem solving capabilities that a good, solid, mature group that has reached maturation, so to speak, and adjoining. How do we close this out? Do we just walk away, or is there a high five moment that we can say we're successful, and maybe we throw a party at the end, but we're adjourned, we come to a conclusion? How do we do that success? As leaders, how do we do that? Hersey and Blanchard. We're looking at the actual style in which we can go about. These are those strategies that we can use. Those between Ivanovich, and Wallace, and there's some other people in there. That's why you have the et al. When you look at leaders telling and leaders selling and leaders participating and leaders delegating, those are styles or strategies we can use, and orientation. That's that direct supervision. That's the way we want. And in the beginning, when we're forming groups, we might want to be a lot more direct, because once again, we want to look at this as you're the leader, and this is the group. And as the leader within the group, you want to make sure your group is moving forward as singular and not as various different pieces going here and there and pulling and tugging, that you get out of that storming phase. Internal problem solving, the leader encourages cohesion in the storming, but it's not quite there. It's not there. Not till you get to norming, when you have that productivity. You actually can say, yeah, okay, we're good, we're moving. And evaluation and control of leadership assumes, or leadership doesn't assume, you get those other leaders, those leaders that aren't so much entitled like a sergeant or a supervisor, but they're the informal leaders. So, any questions on that? And the personal interaction. Stop here.